For almost all of human history, nobody heated a room. Not peasants, not kings, nobody. The idea that a whole house should sit at one comfortable temperature is roughly 150 years old. Everything before that was a different problem, solved in a completely different way. Picture yourself inside a house in January, 300 years ago. There is a fire going. It has been burning since dawn, and 3 feet away from it, the water in a pitcher is freezing solid. Nobody in that room would have called it a crisis. It was just January. So how did people get through 4 months of that, every year, for thousands of years? The answer has very little to do with blankets, and the one invention you would assume rescued them actually made the cold worse. Start with the fire, because the fire is where most people go wrong. A fire does not warm a room. A fire warms whatever surface is pointed at it. Your face gets hot, your back stays cold. You turn around to even it out, and now your face is cold. Move 6 feet away, and the warmth is simply gone. If you like history where the obvious answer turns out to be wrong, you will probably like it here. Worth sticking around. 19th century American households left records of this. Ink freezing on writing desks. Pitchers cracking overnight as the water inside turned to ice. These are homes with fires burning in them. The room you are sitting in right now is almost certainly warmer than any room a human being sat in before about 1880. That is the baseline everything else here gets measured against. So the first rule of winter was never to heat the building, it was to heat the body. Layer 1 was clothing, and it was heavier than you are picturing. Wool, worn in multiple layers, indoors and outdoors, day and night. People did not change into something lighter for bed. They added to what they already had on. A wool cloak was not an outdoor garment, it was bedding you happened to be wearing. Layer 2 was the bed, and the bed was closer to a small building than to a piece of furniture. Across Brittany, Scotland, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia, people slept in box beds. A box bed is a wooden cupboard with a mattress inside it. Solid panels on every side, sometimes a step and a storage bench underneath. You climbed in, pulled the doors shut behind you, and sealed yourself into a space about the size of a small closet. Your own body did the rest. A sealed wooden box, warmed by 1 or 2 people, holds temperature well even when the room around it is close to freezing. It also made the air in there thick and stale by morning, which nobody seems to have considered a serious drawback. These were not a novelty. In rural Brittany, the closed bed, the lit clo, was the main piece of furniture in the house. Scottish cottages and city tenements were still being built with box beds and bed recesses as late as 1900. Layer 3 was the room, not the house, the room. Families shut off most of their home for the winter and lived in 1 or 2 spaces. Doors closed, everyone together, the rest of the building left to go cold and stay cold until spring. Half your house was effectively uninhabitable for a third of the year, and that was considered normal. Layer 4 is the one people struggle to believe. In parts of Wales, in northern and western England, and across northwest Europe, families lived in the same building as their cattle. The building type is called a Byre dwelling, or a longhouse. Humans at one end, livestock at the other, a wooden partition between them. Archaeologists find this arrangement in northwest Europe going back to the Bronze Age. In Britain, it spread mainly during the 13th century. The usual explanation is warmth. Cattle put out a lot of body heat, and it bled through the partition to the human side. I want to be careful with that one. It gets repeated everywhere, but it is largely traditional belief rather than measured fact. Byre dwellings also kept animals from being stolen, kept them alive through winter, and kept manure close to the fields that needed it. Warmth may have been a welcome side effect rather than the reason. Honestly, we do not know the split. Ask most people what solved winter, and they will say the fireplace and the chimney. Fire moved against a wall, smoke sent up a flue, clean air in the room. It sounds like straightforward progress. For warmth, it was a step backwards. An open hearth in the middle of a room radiates in every direction, and nothing carries that heat away. Even the smoke gives up its warmth on the way out through the roof. Take that same fire, push it against a wall, and attach a chimney, and you have built an efficient machine for sending hot air outdoors. The historian Leroy Dresbeck studied what chimneys did to English households. What he found had less to do with temperature than with how many people could gather. Around a single fire, that number dropped by roughly 3/4. Rooms got smaller. Ceilings came down. Nobles stopped eating in the Great Hall and withdrew into private chambers. Merchants in Bruges and Paris and London built houses with a fireplace in each room. A household that had been one group around one fire became several small groups behind several doors. The chimney won because it cleared the air and because it bought privacy. Warmth was what it cost. And the smoke it removed had been doing a job nobody asked it to do. In parts of England, mostly Devon, there are late medieval roofs still standing with their original thatch attached. They survived because centuries of hearth smoke coated the underside in soot, and the soot preserved it. Archaeologists have pulled intact medieval grain, weed seeds, and beetles out of that thatch, granary weevils included. It is one of the better accidents in archaeology. The one feature of the medieval house that everyone was glad to be rid of turns out to have been quietly preserving the evidence for 600 years. Whether anyone at the time understood that smoke protected the roof is a separate question, and there is no good evidence that they did. Europe did eventually find a real answer. By the 14th and 15th centuries, tiled stoves were spreading through Central European towns. Archaeologists have recovered thousands of stove tiles from urban sites of that period. A well-built, tiled stove holds heat in its ceramic mass, releases it slowly, and vents cleanly. It genuinely heated a room. It was also expensive, which meant it warmed the people who were already comfortable. Warmth, though, was only half of winter. The other half was food, and food is what actually killed people. Around 90% of the population were subsistence farmers. Everything depended on harvesting enough grain to reach the next harvest, with enough left over to plant. When the growing season shortened, that margin disappeared. Between roughly 1560 and 1660, it shortened badly. That century was the harshest stretch of the Little Ice Age, and food crises cluster across Europe from about 1550 to 1710. Grain stored wet, especially rye, grew ergot fungus. People ate it anyway because the alternative was eating nothing, and were poisoned by it. In France, across the 2 years from 1693 to 1694, roughly 1.5 million people died of starvation or the diseases that came with it. And the timing of those deaths is strange. In the early 1900s, excess winter mortality across Europe did not peak in the depths of January. It peaked around April to June. That peak only shifted back to March by the late 1960s. You survived the cold. Then the stores ran out. Cold weakened people. Hunger and illness finished the job, weeks after the worst weather had already passed. The gap between the coldest month and the deadliest month is the whole shape of pre-modern winter in a single statistic. None of this was unavoidable. Real central heating already existed and had for a very long time. Romans were building hypocausts from the 1st century BC. A raised floor standing on short pillars, hot gas from a furnace circulating underneath it, a chimney at the far end drawing everything through. Entire rooms warmed evenly from below, mostly in bathhouses. Korea had the ondol, an underfloor system that ran combustion gases through stone channels beneath the living space. Sites associated with it have been dated to around 1000 BC, though the earliest of those dates are argued over. What is not argued over is that the ondol was never abandoned. Korean homes still use underfloor heating today, in an unbroken line from it. Europe lost the hypocaust. For more than 1,000 years after Rome, most of the continent went back to a fire on the floor and a hole in the roof. Technology does not simply pile up over time. It can be dropped. It can stay dropped for 40 generations. So the real answer to how people survived winter is that they gave up on the idea of a warm house completely. They wore their heat. They slept inside a wooden box. They closed off rooms, shared body warmth, tolerated smoke, and accepted that most of their home was unusable for months at a time, which makes your thermostat a stranger object than it looks. It is the reason you can walk into any room in your house right now without thinking about it first. Almost nobody who has ever lived could do that. So if you had to take one of these for a single winter, the box bed, the one shared room, or the cattle on the other side of the wall, which one could you actually live with? Tell me which one you picked and be honest about it.